You might not believe this if I tell you, but the 8th generation console is pretty much ending. I know, hold your surprises there. We are indeed ending our days with the PS4 and the Xbox One. Right now, we are welcoming the PS5 and the Xbox Series X into the console market. It's not just the next generation of game consoles that we're anticipating. The PC market is filled with anticipation of the next generation NVIDIA RTX GPUs, with the endless memes accompanying them alongside the many number of people panic selling their GPUs on eBay. A lot of people cannot wait on the prospect of what the future of gaming would bring, especially the Nintendo fans, as they're sitting there impatiently waiting for a proper Nintendo Direct that show actual Nintendo games instead of that Shun Megumi Tensei game or whatever the heck that was. Oh yes, there's that Super Mario 3D All-Stars game that got limited release until March 2021 so that people can be psychologically manipulated to pre-order it ASAP to the point where online retailers can't fulfill the order. But that's Nintendo for you. I'm not here to talk about Nintendo. I'm here to talk about the upcoming next generation of gaming that I am anticipating about as enthusiastically as a dog that's been recently tranquilized. There's practically no need for me to pay money for the next generation consoles where none of them offer anything new or interesting for the previous consoles other than performance enhancements. The one thing that I recommend everyone to do is to wait for these consoles to actually hit the market and have early buyers to beta test them for us, because that's basically the role of every early buyers ever. As for the upcoming PC hardware, I don't see a reason why I would need to upgrade. Not that I can upgrade. My laptop Acer Nitro 7 with a 6-core i7 9750H and a GTX 1660 Ti can still play video games just fine. My brother, who uses the PC with a Ryzen 5 1500X and an 8GB RX 570, uses it to play Valorant, Minecraft, Among Us, and Brawlhalla. Not exactly Flight Sim 2020. An upgrade that would make sense, especially to a lot of the pro gamers out there, is a monitor that can go more than 60Hz with a 1080p 144Hz being the sweet spot. But unlike my brother, I'm not a pro gamer that plays multiplayer titles. I mostly do programming, video editing, and procrastinating, and I'm still fine with my 60Hz ViewSonic monitor. Point is, there's practically no reason for me to embrace the next generation consoles or hardwares, so instead of hopping into the mainstream bandwagon of waiting for the future to dump its load on our face, I decided to hop back into the past. Instead of saving my money to buy a next generation console or a new PC, I decided to holler up my cousin and ask him if he still has his old PS3 lying around, which he doesn't, so I just bought a new 500GB one for 1.8 million rupiah, or about 130 bucks. You might be asking, why did you buy a PS3? Why can't you just emulate the games on your relatively decent PC? Our PS3 does exist, you know? Good question, and let me explain to you why. Our PS3 is an emulator that is still on its early stages and cannot be used to play the games that I do want to play on a PS3, such as Metal Gear Solid 4, Infamous, and Red Dead Redemption, or at least without the games having errors and crashes and all of that. That being said, I gotta give credit for our PS3 for receiving updates more frequent than a drama YouTuber's upload schedule. Not only that, but House of the Dead 4 works somewhat okay on our PS3, and I prefer to play it on our PS3. We'll get to the reasons why later. I want to explain to you all my reasoning and my mindset in getting myself a PS3 instead of saving my money to get the latest gen consoles or upgrading my PC or literally anything else. It's not just the fact that my experience on the PS3 is limited thanks to my cousin having the hang of it most of the time. It's mostly because of game developers and their tendency in making their video games exclusive to a specific console. The only reason why this mindset still exists is because game developers want to give an arbitrary value to their game consoles without the needs of putting effort in selling their hardware, which is the same as last time, except it performs better, looks better, and yet you still sit on the same couch, look on the same TV, and play the same kind of games with the same kind of controller. Oh, hold on a second, the controller has better motion sensors. Round of freaking applause. And unfortunately, this works. It works on a lot of people. It has certainly worked on me. I wouldn't have a PS4 if it weren't for Atlas shackling Persona 5 into the platform and its weaker brother. Maybe not for long, but we'll never know. If the retail price of Xbox Series S is still consistent when it's launched, I probably would buy it purely because of backwards compatibility. That's the reason why people buy game consoles, is because they have games in them. And of course, I bought the PS3 because there are games in it that are not on the platform platforms that I already own. Also because it's quite cheap and I want to make sure that I can have access to a console that the console manufacturers no longer produce before they decide to jack up the price the moment this thing gets very rare in 10 to 20 years. The moment a video game goes into console exclusivity, that is precisely the moment where you limit the lifespan of these games, choking them to the point of death. These games will die the moment the console that the game is shackled to gets out of production, and when the console manufacturers say, "Yep, we won't be giving backwards compatibility to these," and no one gets to enjoy these games anymore unless the developer suddenly out of the blue moon cares about it. Now, I already listed a lot of the games that are stuck in the PS3 limbo in my Ghost of Tsushima review, Resistance, Killzone, etc. Remember how Infamous and Prototype are released somewhat close to each other and how both of them are taking the superhero sandbox genre to the point where they are compared to one another? In my opinion, Prototype immediately wins for being multi-platform. Granted, the PC port of both Prototype games weren't the best, but at least you can play them on a platform that is still relevant. And then there are the Japanese games. Poor Japanese games. They have to be absolutely shackled to the consoles because at the time, that's the platform that Japanese game companies are more familiar with. A game that some Tales fans consider the best was Tales of Xillia, and you cannot play that unless you have a PS3. Then you have Ashura's Wrath, which I just found out is completely unrelated to the Kengan Ashura anime. Then there's the Persona 4 arena game, Shadows of the Dam, Lollipop Chainsaw, which I notice a lot more people cosplay as rather than actually play the game, and the list goes on and on and on. And of course, there's Metal Gear Solid. Metal Gear Solid is a franchise with neglectful and irresponsible parents, where one of them just gave up on it. Expecting Konami to remaster these games is like expecting Nintendo to not sue anyone making anything they have. As long as Konami decides to stay making pachinko games or whatever the hell they're doing right now, I don't think we'll ever see them do anything to make sure that this franchise and many other Konami's franchises stay relevant. So instead of saving money to buy a next generation console that doesn't have any games to play except the previous console games, why not just spend a portion of that money to buy a last generation console that has tons and tons of games that these game developers will not port into the PC anytime soon? I mean, sure, these games are old and people have probably played them all, but they're still fun to play. That's why people play video games, right? To have fun? How are we gonna have fun playing video games if some of the games they want to play are locked in a platform that has completely stopped production? Oh yeah, that's right. You play other newer games that these companies want you to play because that makes them more profit. That is precisely why I despise console exclusivity, and it's something that no emulators can fix, or at least 100%. The unfortunate thing about all of this is that these following games and many more are stuck in the last gen platforms because video games is not just about having fun. That's video games in our perspective. In the company's perspective, video games is a multi-billion-dollar business. Porting these games into a more relevant platform costs money, especially when the people who developed the game lost the source code, which happens quite a lot, by the way. So now at least you see the reason why I decided to have a PS3. It's cheap, I can at least get it in a somewhat good condition, and there are many games that I haven't played in there. Unfortunately, hopping into the previous gen console isn't exactly the smoothest experience with the current year hardware that I have. You see, I have encountered several problems that I think anyone should be aware of when they decided to hop back into the last gen as we wait for the next gen. First off, good luck finding a PS3 that hasn't been jailbroken in third world countries like Indonesia, because at least 99.9% of them are. And why wouldn't you want to jailbreak a PS3? That's the one way for you to install pirated copies of the games and make sweet bundle deals. These third-party retailers are raking in lots and lots of money selling jailbroken PS3s that have game bundles within them. You can make a sweet freaking deal of 100 plus games bundle on a PS3 with a 1TB SATA hard drive that doesn't really cost much these days. And yes, the PS3 uses standard 2.5-inch SATA hard drive just like the PS4. Now, I definitely wouldn't have a problem with custom firmwares if it weren't such a hassle to manage. The PS3 that I have is a slim version. That one is already outfitted with a custom firmware. The custom firmware that came with my PS3 Slim is version 4.84, and the firmware is some retailer's own custom firmware. The latest Rebug custom firmware is version 4.86. In order for me to upgrade to the latest version, I have to downgrade into 3.55, which is what a lot of custom firmwares are based on apparently, and then update it to 3.57 and then update it to 4.86. Finding the tutorial for that is easy. Figuring out that I have to downgrade first is one hell of a journey, and I'm really no expert in all of this crap. The benefit of a custom firmware is that all the games that I'm going to be playing are going to be pirated versions, or at least you'd think that would be a benefit. benefit. The problem is, not all pirated versions of the game that I downloaded work well. I have successfully beaten the first Infamous, but I cannot run Infamous 2. No matter what I do, the console just shuts itself down after the first in-game cutscene. Red Dead Redemption crashes every single freaking time, and I have no idea why. At that point, I'd rather just buy the game from the PS Store, but since my PS3 has a custom firmware, downloading games from the PS Store is quite a rocky road. And yes, I see you, owners of Xbox One, laughing your asses off. And then there's the controller. Good luck finding an original PS3 controller in third world countries like Indonesia without being scammed. 99.9% of the controllers being sold around Indonesia are fake PS3 controllers. Do they work? Absolutely. But there's a big caveat. These fake controllers are sold for very cheap. They can cost only around $6 a pop. Do you know why they're so cheap? It's because they remove the motion sensors, the pressure sensitive pads, and almost everything else that make the original controller special. What you get is a very bare bones and very basic controller that works with at least 90% of the games, which is good, right? Well, it's only good if you don't play the games that require you to move the controller, such as House of the Dead 4. Remember when I say that I prefer playing House of the Dead 4 on RPCS3? In House of the Dead 4, there are sequences that require you to shake the controller. You cannot change that to button presses or something, which is freaking bizarre. You really need to have the controller that legit has motion sensors so that you can shake them. And since these fake PS3 controllers don't have motion sensors, I'm pretty much dying thanks to these QTEs. The other solution to this problem is, of course, to buy PlayStation Moves. You're telling me to buy PlayStation Moves that cost almost the same as the freaking console just to play House of the Dead 4 and Time Crisis. Sounds like a bad deal there, fam. So what's the solution in playing House of the Dead 4 without being wrecked by arbitrary zombie QTEs and not wasting too much money? Ironically, it's by playing it on RPCS3, which supports DualShock 4. I can use my DualShock 4 on House of the Dead 4, and the DS4 does have motion controls. Wait, why can't you just connect your DS4 to the PS3? Surely that will solve all the problem knowing that it's natively supported, right? Well, not really. The PS3 does support DualShock 4 and you can connect it to the PS3, but it doesn't support the motion sensors. It's not supported in some games and it doesn't support the PlayStation button. You know, the button that you use to go back to the home screen or the XMB, a very essential button. So yeah, the journey in me attempting to go back to one generation isn't exactly smooth sailing, but at least it works, right? Well, yeah, when it does work, it does work. I've been the first Infamous with it with zero problems whatsoever. The games that work actually works and it's legitimately fun. I especially love the fact that I can finally play Skate 3. I love these skate simulator games and this game is certainly quite fun. Oh yeah, I also forgot to mention one thing. The PS3 uses HDMI and I do want to capture some games in it, but then comes another problem. I plug in the HDMI to my Elgato capture card, which is the one that I use ever since my Ripsaw died. I open OBS, it detected my Elgato, but it doesn't capture anything. Ah yes, I forgot that the PlayStation has this thing called HDCP, which is basically a DRM protection to make sure that you're not ripping anything off, generally through HDMI or DVI. With the PS4, you can circumvent the DRM problem by just disabling it in the options menu. With the PS3, the DRM is built right into the hardware. Therefore, you can't turn it off. Therefore, I can't record my gameplay footage. Thankfully, there is a solution to this problem. Get yourself one of those cheap Chinese HDMI splitters, put the PS3 HDMI on the input, grab another HDMI cable, and then plug the output of that into the Elgato. A slightly more complicated setup, but at least it works. So there you have it. That's my journey in going back to one more generation and why I think a lot of gaming enthusiasts should do it, assuming that they haven't done so. A lot of game companies these days are focused in moving forward that they forgot about the legacy that made them. The games that they make in the past, while quite wonky, are still very fun to play even to this day. That's what video games are all about. It's about having fun. The last gen might be outdated, but it's definitely still fun, and there's nothing wrong with going back to it. The future is uncertain, but the past is very clear. Definitely more clear than Atlus's plans to port Digital Devil Saga on PC.